Thank you. I've tried to learn that forever. It's much trickier than it looks on the page. Thank you for that. Some words to gather us as we move into our time of worship. This is from the writer Sarah Alden Ripley. She writes, "The line in life, nature, science, philosophy, religion constantly returns to itself. The opposite poles become one when the circle is completed. All truths revolve around one center. All is a manifestation of one law. To that center we give ourselves, not that we know it, but that we seek it and feel its gravity as it pulls us toward our authentic and genuine selves. Welcome." Now it's your turn. This month, as I've pointed out, I try to select all the readings I can, and even the hymn text and sometimes the tunes from the Wisdom of Women. This first hymn, Lady of the Seasons, Laughter, is not only about the image of a deity in female or feminine form. The text was written by a classmate of mine, a prolific author of hymn texts, the Reverend Dr. Kendall Gibbons, who serves in Kansas City, Missouri. And I hope you'll enjoy this hymn that looks at the divine through a different lens. Shall we sing it together? You may have to hear it through first. Number 51. I'd like you now to share with me responsively in these words, adapted from Louise Erdrich. Life will break us. Nobody can drink. Living alone won't either, for solitude will also break us with its. You have to love. You have to feel. It is the reason we are here on this earth. We are here to risk our heart. We are here to be swallowed up. And when we are broken or betrayed or left or hurt or death brushes near, sit by an apple tree. Listen to the apples falling all around you in heaps, wasting their sweetness. Say, we tasted as many as we could. Isn't that a lovely sentiment? I like that very much. The great joy of being a preacher is you get to read places you've never been before. And every week I encounter pieces of poetry and wisdom that I just delight in sharing. My name is Fred Wooden. I am the preaching pastor here along with my colleague Jason Hubbard, who is my comrade in forming worship. He conducts our chapel worship at 9:30. I conduct the 11 o'clock service, though we do move around a little bit from time to time. But I'm so glad to see you all here. Fountain Street Church is, well, let's put it this way. We like to think we're unique, and the trouble is we're right. Because we are Baptist in history, we are dissenters by nature, and we are inclusive in hopes. If you're here visiting us for the first time, you are already part of our community, even though you might be sitting next to someone who's been here for 30, 40 or more years. I know someone in this house this morning, I saw his face, was baptized by Milton McGarrell, which goes back to the time before the Second World War. And yet from that time to this, we are a community consistently seeking to free our minds, to grow our souls, and to change the world. So if you're here and you're new, welcome. Be part of us as long as you wish. And for all of us who have been here a long time, isn't it nice to be home? This is Fountain Street Church, and we belong here. For those who don't know, if you came in after I announced the news, all of this equipment here is temporary and exciting because Laugh Fest has some of its acts here and they adapt for the period of time. Every now and then I think maybe we'll just leave it here and see how long people take to notice that things have not changed. Passages, readings, fragments, words, almost always by people who no longer live but whose thoughts are embedded in our culture for a variety of reasons. In this particular case, I'm reading two passages, one long, old, and one very short and new, in which case the author is still alive. In fact, she is in her 20s. In my march through the book of Psalms this year, we are at Psalm 28. I typed the wrong number there. God, I call to you my rock. Do not ignore me or hold yourself aloof from me. I shall be like those gone to the pit. Listen to my plea for mercy when I cry out to you, when I lift my hands toward you in your inner sanctuary. Do not count me with the wicked and evildoers who profess goodwill, while malice is in their hearts. Pay them according to their deeds, their malicious acts, according to their handiwork pay them. Give them their just deserts. For they do not consider your deeds, the work of your hands. May you tear them down, never to rebuild them. Blessed is Adonai, who listens to my plea for mercy. Adonai is my strength and my shield. My heart trusts in Adonai. I was helped and my heart exulted, so I will glorify Adonai with my song. God is their strength. Adonai is a stronghold for the deliverance of the anointed. Deliver and bless your very own people. Tend them and sustain them forever. Rupi Kaur, she is Sikh. She is Punjabi Canadian. How about that? Her family is Sikh, comes from Punjab. She lives in Canada. And this very short fragment stuck with me as I was researching this week. She writes, I am water, soft enough to offer life, tough enough to drown it. Wow. I'll come back to her in a little while. Oh, boy, what a wonderful variety of musical moments we're having this morning. They're all different voices, aren't they? That was not just it was the music, but also the instrument. You may not know, Natalie actually kind of comes along for the ride. She's emotionally tethered to one of our AV folk, but you've become part of our community too, and that's the point. What? Yeah, and of course, then we had those wonderful young voices, and they had a different sound. And we heard Marilyn play the hymn earlier, and that was a different sound. And the choir sang, and that was a different sound. And all of us, if we listened, would hear in each of our voices a somewhat different sound. Yet, from a voice point of view, from a piano point of view, from a fiddle point of view, they should all pretty much sound like each other. Piano should sound alike, fiddles, voices, but they don't. I'm supposed to be praying, right? My point here is that I can make words, but you are the ones that have to pray. That is to say, the voice you carry within you, of you, from you, for you, belongs to you. And even though we may not hear it during our time of prayer, it is present. And it, like the bricks in the wall, like the fragments of glass in the windows, together creates an entity of the Spirit. And if we are wise and modest and humble, we can sometimes hear it even in the silence. Let's find our way into prayer, shall we? Hashem Adonai, that which is and is not, present, absent in the breath of my words and in the light stumbles out of distant galaxies. Give voice to my voice. Let me hear who I am today. Wounded and willing, strong, silent, wondering, sure, perplexed, frightened. All those things that with overtones create the sound that is me to me. Each of us. We bring all our stories into this room and together knit them into a single inner voice, meant not for others but for our inner ears alone, and yet together in this room we can sense the hum of our holiness. So be it grief or loss, despair or dismay, or longing and hope, gratitude or contrition, we pause to hear our voice, and in it find yours. Upon all these things, we pause now and share that prayer which is only ever present in the midst of silence. And so may it be. I'm going to introduce our next musicians because the music they're going to sing departs materially from the mood I just cast. But that doesn't mean it is not wise or good. I'm so glad Kathy can join us today. It's an honor to have you with us. And we all know right. If you don't know right, you should know right. And he is a wonderful member and a giver of great music to us. So thank you for being with us and shifting the mood a little bit.
When I was a little girl and the devil would call my name, I'd say, now who do you think you're fooling? I'm a consecrated girl singing in the Sunday choir. Ooh, my mama loves loves me. She loves me. She gets down on her knees and hugs me. Well, she loves me like a rock. She rocks me like the rock of ages and loves me. She loves me, loves me, loves me, loves me. Well, I was grown to be a woman, and the devil would call my name. I'd say, now who do you think you're fooling? I'm a consummated one, looking for a little punity. Oh, my mama loves me, she loves me. She gets down on her knees and hugs me. Oh, she loves me like a rock. She loves me like the rock of ages and loves me. She loves me, love me, love me, love me. Well, if I was the president and the Congress would call my name, and I'd say, now who do you think you're fooling? I got the presidential seal. I'm on the presidential podium. My mama loves me. Yeah, she loves me. She gets down on my knees and loves me. Oh, she loves me like a rock. She rocks me like the rock of ages and loves me. She loves me, loves me, loves me, loves me. She loves me, loves me, loves me, loves me. She loves me, loves me, loves me, loves me.
Oh, that was fun. Of course, that song was written many years ago by Paul Simon, and it is so persuasively written in a style that is covered, as we now call it, by a number of different groups, especially male a cappella groups, and it's a great song. It was written down there in that period somewhere between Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon, and so that last verse has, shall we say, pertinence then, and it may have pertinence now. I'll leave that to you. But it also has sentimental value to me because this was the song my son chose to dance with his mother at his wedding. And so I have memories in that. Well, she loves me like a rock. You got that. I'll say more about that as a metaphor in a few minutes. But last week I omitted, again, because the music was so wonderful, my remembrance of those who have passed, who I invoke, at least I try to invoke every Sunday as a recollection of those who have gone before and as a prayer of perhaps blessing upon this endeavor that I call preaching. I wish to lift up the names of those who last week and this week their lives came to their conclusion in our midst, and yet their gifts to this church and to the community endure. I lift up the names of Sue Verdine Miller and David LeClaire, of Bill Idema and Fran Lesh, of Barbara Greninger and Grace Jaretsky and Teresa Buist, let me get that right, Virginia Lehman, Nyla Humphrey, Mary Ann Van Westernen, Vera Campbell, Mary Thomason, Helen Middleton, Henrietta Wieland, and because I could not help but notice the family of Kelly H. Smith as well. These were dear in their time and continue to be dear to us, and in the words of an ancient prayer uttered in many a synagogue, El Malei Rachamim, Shokein Barachamim, God filled with mercy, dwelling in the heavens heights, bring rest beneath the wings of your Shekinah to the souls of our beloveds and who have gone to their eternal place of rest. May you, who are a source of mercy, shelter them beneath your wings eternally, bind their souls to you and to we the living, that they may rest in peace, that we may be at peace, and let us say, Amen. I did not like this psalm at all. It just said the same thing over and over again. But you know, you make a commitment, you make a commitment. And the reality is that not every text and not every poem and not every piece of wisdom is going to be fun to read. So I found myself digging around, kind of poking at it. And I thought I'd start with this silly sentence. I never met a four I didn't like. It's a pun, right? Well, what you may not recognize or know is that many of these psalms in the book of Psalms are filled with puns. They're Hebrew puns, so they don't translate into English well. But in Hebrew, a pun is not low comedy, but high art. It is meant to suggest a connection between two words that is implicit by their being similar without being explicit about being why. And in this particular case, in that verse where it says, do not disregard me, but for if you hold aloof from me, those two words almost rhyme in Hebrew. And so they're meant to be connected in some way. And so when translators try to translate them, and they're good at noticing this, they try to find two words that give a flavor for it, and they sometimes work and they sometimes don't. The King James Version, for example, is often the closer when it comes to the literal meaning, and uses the verb silent rather than aloof. But it also uses the word silent for the other verb, because they are close but not the same. The Revised Standard uses the phrase refuses to hear, which is like silent but not quite the same, but it uses silent the second time like the King James. And the New English Version chooses the word deaf for the first one and silent for the second. And they all convey the same basic notion. My favorite scholar, Robert Alter, who translates biblical Hebrew not for religious purposes but for scholarly purposes, uses the terms deaf and mute, trying to play on the similarity between them as disabilities, not because they are, but because they have to do with that felt similarity. Now, these differences are and should sound very trivial to you because they are not the stuff of sermons, which are to inspire. I'm not here to analyze the poem. Besides, my knowledge of Hebrew is very fragmentary. I say it now only to illustrate that there is a messiness in the Bible. Even when you know exactly what the word says, what it actually means is sometimes hard to nail down, and various translations come at it differently, which pretty much ruins the whole fundamentalist notion, doesn't it? I wish some of them would notice that. We have a text, and it isn't clear even when we know all the words. Metaphors do not yield clear meanings. And I want to go back to metaphors. And it's those things, those metaphors, those plays on words that keep drawing us back to even ancient poems like the Psalms, because they have a durable inquiry and intrigue about them, even though they're centuries old. And even when I don't like this psalm because it's so repetitive, it isn't a theological expression. It's a fellow saying, why are you not paying attention? I'm having a tough day. Be mean to them instead. Have we not all had that experience? Whether it's King David or someone else, the point is his humanity or her humanity is very evident from the text. Now, the irony is that sometimes the metaphors translate exactly right. There's no ambiguity whatsoever. And Hebrew uses a lot of them. And the one that shows up over and over again, as you might understand from the title of the sermon, is the word in Hebrew, tsur, T-S-U-R, or the word rock. And that's exactly what appears in the first line. Oh God, I call to you my rock, tsuri. Tsuri means my rock. And the poet is calling out to God. And the meaning is evident, something dependable, something strong upon which I can rely. The metaphor is a familiar one, so much so that it appears in Christian literature later. You might have remembered a few weeks ago on a whim, I remembered an old Protestant hymn, on Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is shifting sand. And that refers to the parable in the Gospels of the two builders, the one who built on rock and the one who built on sand, and of course the one on sand rolled away and blah, blah, blah. And of course that means you should infer that you have to believe in that which is durable and true like a rock. Love me like a rock. They all hang together on that one symbol, rock, the sturdiness of the rock. Even when we sing of mothers who loves me like the rock of ages. Strong, durable, dependable, and wrong. At some point, we have all been, perhaps on an aeroplane, and you're going over the landscape, and if you've been lucky, you've gone over the Grand Canyon. And you can look down and say, I know exactly how that happened. Because you can see the river at the bottom winding its way, and over eons and eons it cut its way through the rock. The rock may look strong, but it's not as strong as the water, which may be soft enough to offer life, but tough enough to drown. The water will, in fact, eat the rock away if it has enough time. It does, it has, and it continues to do. Also, the wind. Have you ever seen a slot canyon out in the southwest? They look like these creepy shaped rocks, and sometimes very sinuous, because the wind blows through them and eats away the rocks slowly, grain by grain, creating these wind-blown sculptures. Wind and water will eat the rock away, I guarantee it. Now, in ancient times, that was not obvious. You could look at a rock, you could look at the water and say, hey, that's silly. Water can't do a thing to the rock. We now know that's true because our senses, though they are limited, have been extended by the work of science so that we can look with greater clarity on this process that takes eons. Some of you may have read the book, The Once and Future King, T.H. White's rendering of the Arthur legend. And in the early book, The Sword and the Stone, Merlin turns young Arthur into an ant and to other things, including a goose, and then leads him up to fly in the sky and bids him look down upon the earth, where young Arthur discerns that there are no lines on the ground the way they are on the maps, and that what appears to be a boundary is only something humans agree to call a boundary. It does not exist in any material sense of the word. He got outside the box, as it were, Arthur did. And as we do when we fly on an airplane or stand at the top of, say, like the Sears Tower and look down and realize the streets aren't quite as straight as the maps would indicate. Our perspective can be changed. And what we cannot see directly with our senses, we can learn through other forms. We can realize that the world isn't exactly as we experience it. It's larger. Who doesn't remember learning about Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who ground a little lens and then looked at a drop of water and found things in it that were alive? It's not just larger, it's smaller. So the idea of using rock as a symbol for durability and strength, I can understand how it came to be. If we experience it that way, you fall on a rock, you bleed, you fall in the puddle, you get wet, that kind of thing. But we can no longer afford to use outdated metaphors, really. It does hang on because, well, it's well known, and ironically, it's a durable metaphor one way or the other. But come to think, there are lots of metaphors we use that don't make any sense when you think about it. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? How many of you have boots with straps? Now, I'm going to demonstrate the silliness of this because I have to come out of the pulpit. Let's imagine I have boots on, all right? And I'm supposed to pull myself up by them. So first of all, I have to get down and get my boots. And I'm pulling myself up by my bootstraps. And if I pull hard enough, where will I land? Not up. And yet we have the phrase and we know what it means. Similarly, don't put all your eggs in one basket. How many of you have ever carried around eggs in any basket at all? Maybe a couple of you who grew up near a farm. Yay for you. And you know why you don't put all your eggs in a basket? Because if you drop the basket, all the eggs break. But we use the phrase even at the mire. Even in our refrigerators. That is to say, we use a metaphor that has no anchorage in reality, even though we have kept the meaning. And of course, don't look a gift horse. How many of you have gotten a gift horse? Did you look at it in the mouth? And why shouldn't you? Because you're insulting the giver. Because you look a horse in the mouth to figure out its age through its teeth. So it is an insult to the giver of a gift to examine the gift for its legitimacy. We all understand that, but we no longer have done that. So that's what happens. Metaphors make sense at the moment. They have a meaning. We carry them into another age. We keep the meaning and we lose the original context altogether. That's why we use them, but they become unhinged from our reality. So I'm going to turn to another metaphor to tell you that we even do it. Yes, even we, current liberal, happy people who know better. We have a poem we love in this church, as most liberal churches, and we think it says something important about us, and it starts, 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood. You know it all, right? And you know the last 2 lines, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. It's the most searched poem on Google. It is probably the best known English language poem around the world. It's short and memorable. It's a metaphor, clearly. And most of us would say it's a metaphor about making your own choices, being different from everybody else. Whoso would be a man, said Ralph Waldo Emerson, would be a nonconformist. We religious liberals like all that, and that's a good thing. Now, what is the name of the poem? The Road Not Taken. Which is the road more taken? Do you understand? The poem is about the road he didn't take, not the road he did. It says something that we don't quite grasp because we are so married to the metaphor of taking the road less traveled, we forget that the poem is not about the taking of the road less traveled, it's about the decision, and the decision turns out to be 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, because as he said, though as far as for passing there had warned them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay. So even though he thought it was less traveled, it probably wasn't. Frost is subverting the metaphor even as he uses it. According to David Orr, a poet who wrote in the Paris Review, how cool is it that I read the Paris Review? This poem, the poem isn't a salute to can-do individualism. It's a commentary on the self-deception we practice when constructing the story of our lives. In other words, we talk ourselves into the things that we think mean something. We use metaphors, but not the way they mean them, not the way they are meant to be meant, but the way we want to mean them. We find metaphors everywhere and project our own meanings on top. I thought about a scene in that television program MASH. Some of us remember it because we're old enough, and there's the Corporal Radar O'Reilly who consistently misspeaks, and he malaprops a wonderful metaphor. That's a bear we all got to cross. As opposed to a cross we all got to bear. And when you think about it, they probably mean pretty much the same thing. Do you know where the word sideburns came from? From a fellow who wore mutton chop whiskers in the Civil War named General Ambrose Burnsides. We turn the word around because they're along the side. We are shifting meanings at all levels. We're injecting meanings. We're creating metaphors at every turn. It's astonishing sometimes that we understand each other at all. So this leads me to the point I want to make. Mothers are not like rocks ever, ever, ever. Even metaphorically, they don't last forever. At most, they rock their children back and forth. And the rock that is stronger than sinking sand is just sand under construction by the ocean. It will eventually give way, and the rock will become the very thing that the metaphor says it shouldn't be. To be honest, water would be a better metaphor, don't you think? Remember, I am water, soft enough to offer life. Oops, but then it says tough enough to drown. Maybe not. But here's my point beyond the point. We all still want the rock. We all want to have that strong, dependable, reliable thing in our lives. And as we give up one after another, we're going to continue looking for that thing that will be the same as they say in some churches, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I get the desire. I have that desire. I think you do too. I even use biblical words at the end of my sermon. Thou who art my rock and my redeemer. What am I doing when I say that silly metaphor? I'll tell you what. I am expressing my hope, not my knowledge, my hope that there is something everlasting and true, and my secondary and equal hope that what I say is worthy of that first hope, that I am not lying. That's all. I don't know that there's something out there that's reliable and dependable. I want there to be. You bet there. I would surely like there to be something like that. But I don't know it, and I'm not going to be so bold as to say there is such a thing. Somewhere in my adult past, I had a moment when I realized, maybe it was earlier than that, somewhere in my near adult past, I had a moment when I realized my father could not save me. I know exactly when that moment was. He was in the hospital recovering from cancer surgery. And there he was in the Johnny, surrounded with machines, looking weak because he was, looking pale because he was, and out of touch with reality because of the drugs. And I saw my father and saw the person who was my father, not the metaphor who was my father. And it was a hard moment for me. He was largely incoherent. He recovered and resumed his personality, but ever after, I was aware he was never going to be the same man that I remember holding me in his arms, carrying me up to bed when I fell asleep at night. But here's the deal. I can still remember that man too. I can still feel his arms against my cheek if I think really hard. And I can remember what it feels like to be small enough to be carried, even though I know the man is gone. I also remember how my mother would kiss it and make it better. And it was. The magic of a mother's lips. In my case, they came with a breath of cigarette smoke that became part of who she was. But I didn't think of that as bad. It was who she was, and her presence and her lips and my forehead all said, I am loved and I am safe, the way my father's arms did. Even though my mother clearly was never going to be able to perform surgery if I needed it. She could not make my illnesses go away, but both of them, in those moments in my childhood, conveyed to me a sense of safety, dependability, security, which is what we want as children and what we want to do as parents. Is there anything more pleasant as a parent, more satisfying than when we can care for and protect our children? Is there anything more heartbreaking than when we cannot? This is where religious faith happens, right there in your parents' arms as they kiss you on the forehead. A great theologian from 2 centuries ago said that religion began with the feeling of absolute dependence, which means I feel small, but I feel safe. As a child, and like a child, we look for those things that convey safety and security. We seek symbols to represent that in a turbulent and fluid world. But let's be clear, we are not looking for mom and dad as adults. We know they're gone. And even if they're not gone, we know they cannot carry us to bed. They cannot kiss it and make it better. Neither are we looking for a rock we can literally stand on. What we are looking for, oh dear God, why am I even going here? We're looking for love. We're not looking for the rock, we're looking for the love. I'm walking a new path these days as a political candidate, and I don't bring it into the church for many good reasons, but there are aspects that are important, that are worth reporting on. Because I find a world out there saying, Fred, take a stand. Be like a rock. Be firm. Be clear. Be sure. Be right. Be good. Be strong. Be a rock. I can't. It's a lie. That doesn't mean I don't have beliefs or values, but I know I'm made of 98% water, not rock. My heart, my soul, my mind knows that all the great things we want from our nation, from our lives, from our communities, liberty, justice, equality, democracy, prosperity, even truth, are all a journey, a search, a longing, a wish. They don't exist as a spot or a place or a person or a rock. It is always on the way toward. Those founders and framers didn't create a nation that had those things. They wanted to create a nation that could get get those things. And it hasn't happened yet, and that is not a sin. Those are big goals. But here I want to invoke something very strange. A Pakistani poet, Muhammad Iqbal, and he writes a poem that's in our hymn book that's called The Journey of Love. He talks about standing under the starry skies and feeling stormed by love. What an experience that must have been, in that sense that somehow, if we are drawn by love to seek it, it will take us where we need to go. And that includes liberty and justice. It includes equality and democracy, prosperity and even truth. All of it can be found on the path of love. But we have to go there. We have to go on that journey. And what politician is going to talk about being on a journey of love and have anything more than 2 votes in November? But that's the truth. What we want as people, what we want as a community, what we want as a nation, as a species, is the stuff we only find if we take the journey of love. But I know this: while rocks will break down, though the Rockies may tumble, Gibraltar may crumble, they're only made of clay. The journey of love is here to stay. That's real. Love is real. We all know what our mother's lips feel like. We know what our father's arms feel like. We know what love feels like because we have gotten it and we have given it. You can depend on love. You can't depend on rocks. Of course, there is a tragic element present in our lives. Tragic in the sense that what we need to be safe and whole is therefore very close by. The journey is not over there. It's here. It's here. What did the man say? We all remember it if we grew up. The kingdom of God is within you. It's not something that's going to come at you. It's already present. The love we seek, that we need, is already in our midst, and yet we keep looking behind us as though it's in our past when we were greater somehow. Or maybe we think it's off in the future when we will be perfect somehow. When in reality it's not in a philosophy or a theory or a memory or a promise. It is right here today. And as hokey as it sounds, love is the answer. But only if we choose to walk the journey of love and actually live it, not just wait for it to come and bite us. And that's the hard part. And that's why we still read poems, why we still care about psalms. They remind us of what we know and choose to forget, of how we still long for something more than we are. Though we are not sure how to do it, the poems and the psalms and the stories push us, egg us on to make a life worthy of the gift of life itself. They tell us what we could be if we dared to be. That what we need is already present if we had the courage of our hearts and of our love. And that's what it comes down to, brothers, sisters, comrades. To love is an act of courage. To love sometimes when you don't want to. To love the person who doesn't want to be loved. To love them in a way that they don't feel like they're being forced to love you back. Could there be anything more difficult and yet more necessary? But that is the journey of love. What we want, what we dearly want, is to be nearer to each other. Truly nearer. So near that we can feel the breath upon us as we are carried to bed. When we can feel their lips upon our cheek as they make it all better. We want to be nearer to one another. And we can. If we just take the journey of love. It won't be the shortest trip we ever made, and I guarantee we won't all get there. But we will get closer. And sometimes that's enough. May these words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my love and my Redeemer.